Do you really think you can just kick my family out of our home? Go ahead, try. I'm ready for you. That's what I told Vanessa Reed the moment she showed up with her stack of eviction papers, her smile dripping with entitlement like she owned every blade of grass in our neighborhood. Little did she know, she'd just awakened a sleeping lion. My name is Ethan Clark. This house isn't just bricks and mortar to me. It's my family's legacy, the only home I've ever known, passed down by my parents who built this place with their own hands. It's where my dad taught me to fish by the lake out back, where my mom's laughter still echoes in the halls, and where my son Jake took his first steps. Before we dive deeper, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments, and trust me, stick around until the end because what I'm about to share, it's how I made those HOA bastards wish they'd never come knocking. This story isn't just about standing up to a bully, it's about taking them down with style. The conflict started small, almost invisible at first. The HOA, led by Vanessa, had always been the neighborhood's self-appointed dictator, but we lived peacefully enough, until the day they targeted our family kayak, the very one my father and I used every summer on Lake Serenity. That kayak wasn't just a piece of equipment, it was a symbol of all those quiet afternoons we spent together, just father and son, learning about patience, nature, and each other. It was Vanessa who first complained, claiming the kayak was unapproved for our front yard storage, even though it was tucked neatly behind the fence. She sent a letter demanding its removal, citing some obscure rule about visual aesthetics. That letter felt like a slap to the face. How could she not understand what that kayak meant to me? It was more than a boat. It was a connection to my late father, a memory I wasn't about to let them erase. I still remember the day my dad passed away. It hit me like a freight train. In those dark moments, that kayak was all I had left of him. Whenever I felt lost, I'd sit by the lake, paddle out into the quiet, and feel like he was right there beside me. So when Vanessa and her cronies tried to bully me into tossing it out like trash, I knew this was going to be war. Our first real confrontation came during one of those painfully long HOA board meetings where they spend more time policing neighbors than fixing anything that actually matters. Vanessa smirked as she pointed fingers, spewing threats about fines and community standards. I stood my ground, telling them straight up that this was family property, not some decoration to be approved or denied on a whim. "You don't scare me," I said, locking eyes with her. "This kayak stays." You could feel the tension in the room thicken, like the calm before a storm no one saw coming. The other neighbors shifted nervously, some avoiding eye contact, others clearly torn between siding with the HOA or supporting a man fighting for his home. That moment was the turning point. I realized this wasn't just about a kayak anymore. It was about my family's dignity and the right to live without fear of arbitrary rules and tyrants like Vanessa. But I didn't rush in blindly. I started documenting every interaction, every letter, every fine. I spoke with a local attorney who confirmed the HOA's rules were murky at best and that many of their demands didn't hold up under scrutiny. I wasn't going to lose my family home because some power-hungry woman fancied herself a queen. Jake, my son, watched everything unfold with the fire of youth and a mind sharper than most adults I know. He wasn't about to let his family get steamrolled either. When Vanessa's threats escalated to eviction notices, Jake said quietly one evening, "Dad, I've got someone who can help us." That's when Marcus entered the picture, our son's bodyguard, a calm but formidable presence who would soon turn the tide in our favor. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For now, this is where the story begins, a man standing his ground against an overbearing HOA queenpin who thought she could push us around. I'll show you exactly how that unfolded and how we went from feeling cornered to taking control, step by strategic step. So buckle up and keep watching, because Vanessa and her HOA bullies never saw this coming. And trust me, you'll want to see how this ended, with a payoff that even they couldn't ignore. After standing my ground in that first meeting, I thought maybe the HOA would back off, or at least stop with the petty complaints. I was wrong. Vanessa Reed's reign of control didn't just continue, it escalated. The kayak was just the opening salvo. A week later, I found a notice on my door, this time accusing me of unauthorized parking. Apparently, a friend's car had been parked in my driveway for a few hours, and that was enough for Vanessa to label it a violation. The fine was small, but the message was clear. They wanted to wear us down. I didn't panic. Instead, I called the HOA office and asked for specifics on their parking rules. Their responses were vague and inconsistent, filled with legal jargon that seemed designed to confuse rather than clarify. When I pushed back, the receptionist grew curt, as if my questions were an inconvenience. That's when I realized Vanessa wasn't interested in fairness, she was after control. Jake was watching all this closely. One evening, over takeout and half-hearted attempts at homework, he said, "Dad, they think they can scare us into compliance, but they don't know what we're capable of." His confidence was contagious. I smiled, but inside I was worried. This wasn't just a battle over property. It was a war on our family's peace. One afternoon, I decided to talk to a few neighbors. I needed to know if anyone else had faced Vanessa's wrath or if we were singled out. Walking down Maple Street, I bumped into Mrs. Henderson, an elderly lady with a garden that looked like it belonged in a magazine. She sighed as soon as I mentioned the HOA. "Oh, Ethan, you're not the only one. Vanessa fines me for the tiniest things, a crooked flower pot, a blade of grass out of place, but no one talks about it openly. People are afraid." That fear was palpable in the neighborhood. Some residents had quietly paid fines or removed decorations just to avoid confrontation. Others whispered complaints behind closed doors but stayed silent at meetings. I decided that silence wasn't an option for us. Next came the letters, stacks of them, each more demanding than the last. One warned me about excessive noise after Jake's birthday party, though the music stopped well before 10 p.m. Another accused us of improper waste disposal because our recycling bins weren't perfectly aligned. It was absurd, and it was deliberate. Vanessa was building a case, pushing us closer to the edge. At a community barbecue, I overheard Vanessa speaking to a group of residents, her tone dripping with smug satisfaction. "We must uphold standards, or this neighborhood will lose its charm. Families like the Clarks need to understand that rules apply to everyone." Her words stung. It wasn't about rules, it was about power. That night, I called my lawyer, Claire. Calm and sharp, Claire didn't sugarcoat the situation. "Ethan, the HOA's rules are written loosely, giving them room to interpret, but they're crossing lines. Harassment, selective enforcement, we have grounds to challenge them legally." Her reassurance was a lifeline. I started documenting everything. Photographs of the kayak perfectly stored behind the fence, records of all letters and fines, notes from neighbors willing to testify. Jake helped by creating a digital folder, organizing every piece of evidence meticulously. Meanwhile, Vanessa's tactics grew more aggressive. One morning, I found a group of HOA board members inspecting our property unannounced, measuring fences and scrutinizing our garden like inspectors on a mission. I confronted them calmly, asking for identification and permission. They shuffled awkwardly, but insisted it was routine. Routine or intimidation. I wasn't about to let them get away with it. Despite the pressure, I refused to back down. Every encounter, every letter was met with clear-headed responses. I attended HOA meetings, not to argue, but to expose their inconsistencies and question their authority. Jake wasn't just a bystander anymore. He spoke up at meetings with a surprising mix of respect and steel. When Vanessa tried to belittle him, he calmly pointed out their lack of transparency and threats of eviction with no legal basis. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Even some board members avoided eye contact. That's when I knew we were rattling their cage, but Vanessa wasn't finished. After one heated meeting, I found another letter, this time a formal eviction notice. The grounds were vague, citing failure to comply with community standards, a catch-all phrase designed to justify anything. I looked at Jake and said, "They want to push us out, they want to erase what we've built." Jake nodded, eyes sharp, "Then we fight smarter." And fight we would. Our next move wasn't just legal, it was strategic. I called Marcus, Jake's bodyguard, a man whose calm presence commanded respect without a word. When Marcus showed up, the neighborhood felt a shift. No longer were we the intimidated family, we were a force. Vanessa's smirk faltered the first time Marcus attended a board meeting. His quiet strength spoke louder than any argument. Together we were ready to turn the tables. The eviction notice landed like a thunderclap, but by then I was already several moves ahead of Vanessa and her board. I had Claire, my lawyer, scouring every page of the HOA's bylaws, looking for weaknesses. And Jake? He was buzzing with ideas, energized by Marcus's steady presence. One afternoon, Claire called with news that felt like a lifeline. "Ethan, they've violated several procedural steps in issuing that eviction notice. It's technically invalid. We can challenge it and stall their efforts." Relief washed over me, but I knew this was only the beginning. The real battle was just heating up. At the next HOA meeting, I decided to show up not as a victim, but as a challenger. When Vanessa strutted in, clipboard in hand, ready to assert her power, I met her gaze without flinching. "This eviction notice you sent? It's full of holes," I said, voice steady. "You didn't follow your own rules, and I intend to hold you accountable." Vanessa's smug smile flickered. "You think you can outsmart the board, Ethan? We enforce community standards. You're just making excuses." The room grew tense. I noticed a few neighbors exchanging glances. Some looked curious, others wary. Jake stepped up next, his youthful confidence cutting through the air. "Maybe it's time we all take a closer look at what community standards really means. Is it about fairness or just control?" Vanessa shot him a glare. "Watch your tone, young man." But Jake was undeterred. "Maybe if the board spent less time harassing families and more time listening, we wouldn't be here." I caught a few nods from other homeowners. It was clear the undercurrent of support was shifting. After the meeting, Marcus and I reviewed the HOA's bylaws together. We found more than just procedural mistakes. There were vague clauses that Vanessa had twisted to serve her agenda. It was clear she was playing a dangerous game, one that left the board vulnerable. Armed with this, we drafted a formal complaint highlighting the HOA's overreach, procedural errors, and the emotional toll their actions were taking on families like ours. We sent copies to the local authorities and community watchdog groups. Vanessa's grip on power began to slip. Meanwhile, the community's whispers grew louder. Some neighbors, once silent, started sharing their own stories of harassment. Mrs. Henderson confided in me about an incident where Vanessa fined her over a bird feeder that was deemed unsightly. Others told tales of unexplained fines and unreasonable demands. The tension wasn't just between us and Vanessa anymore. It was spreading throughout the neighborhood, exposing the cracks in her facade. One evening, as I sat on the porch reflecting, Jake came up with a plan to use social media to raise awareness and rally support. With Marcus's help, we created a private group where residents could share experiences, post evidence, and organize. The digital community grew fast, a stark contrast to the silence at official meetings. Vanessa responded with petty intimidation, anonymous letters threatening more fines, unannounced inspections, and rumors meant to isolate us. But now we weren't alone. Every move she made was met with scrutiny. Then came the moment when Vanessa's own missteps started to backfire spectacularly. At a board meeting she called to address community concerns, a neighbor stood up and questioned her about missing financial reports. Her confident facade cracked. The crowd murmured as she stumbled over explanations. I realized then that this wasn't just about me or my family. It was a power struggle laid bare, exposing greed and misuse behind the HOA's polished veneer. With Marcus quietly observing and Jake energizing the crowd, I knew we were turning the tide. The battle was far from over, but the momentum had shifted. If you've ever faced an unfair fight with an overbearing HOA, or just love a good underdog story, drop a comment below and let me know what you'd do in my shoes. And trust me, what happens next will make those HOA bullies wish they'd never messed with my family. Stay tuned, because the real game changer is coming. After that explosive board meeting, the neighborhood felt different, like the air itself was charged with possibility. Vanessa Reed, once untouchable, was showing cracks, but she wasn't about to surrender without a fight. That's when Marcus stepped fully into the spotlight. Jake had always been confident in Marcus, but it was one thing to have a bodyguard. It was another to see him dismantle Vanessa's intimidation tactics with quiet precision. Marcus attended the next HOA meeting with me and Jake, his presence alone shifting the energy. Vanessa's usual swagger was replaced by a guarded caution. The meeting started like any other, with Vanessa rattling off her list of violations and concerns. She paused dramatically when she noticed Marcus sitting silently beside me, his eyes calm but sharp. "Who invited security to our community meeting?" Vanessa sneered, trying to mask her discomfort. "I did," I replied evenly, "because when your HOA crosses the line into harassment, you need someone who won't back down." The room buzzed with murmurs. Some neighbors glanced at Marcus with a mixture of surprise and relief. Others exchanged wary looks, realizing the power dynamics were shifting. Vanessa tried to regain control, but Marcus's calm, authoritative voice cut through her theatrics. When Vanessa attempted to interrupt a neighbor who was questioning her about missing financial reports, Marcus politely but firmly told her to let the person speak. It was a small moment, but it symbolized a seismic change. No longer was Vanessa the undisputed queen. The board's grip was loosening. Outside the meeting room, I caught up with Mrs. Henderson. "This is the first time in years I've felt like someone's actually listening," she whispered. "You've given us hope." Jake grinned. "We're just getting started." That night, Marcus and I reviewed our strategy. His experience in security and negotiation was invaluable. We decided to push for transparency, demanding that Vanessa and the board release their financial records and meeting minutes publicly. With community support growing, it was time to expose any misconduct. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We organized neighborhood gatherings, inviting residents to share their stories and concerns. Vanessa responded with her usual tactics: anonymous letters, threatening fines, random property inspections, even spreading rumors to isolate families who sided with us. But each attempt only strengthened our resolve. We launched a community newsletter edited by Jake to keep everyone informed and united. The newsletter shared updates on legal progress, spotlighted neighbor testimonials, and highlighted Vanessa's inconsistencies, all backed by hard evidence. At one gathering, a middle-aged couple stepped forward, revealing how Vanessa had threatened them over a small fence repair. The room erupted in support. It was clear Vanessa's reign was unraveling, one story at a time. Meanwhile, Marcus kept a watchful eye. He wasn't just muscle, he was a strategist, advising us when to push and when to hold back. His presence deterred some of Vanessa's more aggressive board members from acting out. One afternoon, Vanessa cornered me in the community center parking lot. Her tone was low and venomous. "You think you're winning? This isn't over, Clark. You'll regret this." I met her gaze steadily. "I'm not fighting because I want to. I'm fighting because I have to, and every neighbor who's had enough of your games is right behind me." She stormed off, but her confidence had cracked. Our momentum culminated in a surprise announcement. Local authorities would be auditing the HOA's financials due to the complaints and evidence we'd compiled. It was a devastating blow to Vanessa's control. That night, as Jake, Marcus, and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I felt something I hadn't in weeks: hope. We weren't just defending a kayak or a driveway anymore. We were standing up for every family suffocated by arbitrary rules and unchecked power. Vanessa had started a war, but she'd awakened a neighborhood ready to fight back. The news about the audit spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. For the first time, Vanessa Reed wasn't the one setting the agenda. The scrutiny was coming from outside her circle of influence. It was a turning point, but the fight was far from over. Vanessa tried to regroup, sending out glossy newsletters promising restored order and community harmony, but most people read between the lines. It was a desperate attempt to save face. I saw it as confirmation that we were hitting where it mattered. Meanwhile, Marcus and I shifted focus to legal loopholes the HOA had been exploiting. Claire, our lawyer, discovered that several fines issued to neighbors were improperly documented, invalidating much of Vanessa's weaponry. We began assembling these findings into a detailed report to present alongside the audit. At a packed neighborhood meeting, I stood before my neighbors, not as a desperate man, but as someone armed with facts and determination. I shared stories of families unfairly targeted, of fines levied for minor yard decorations, even parking on their own property. Jake helped by showing a timeline of the HOA's escalating harassment, supported by photographs and official documents. The room buzzed with energy. Faces that were once hesitant now reflected relief and solidarity. The community wasn't just watching anymore. They were ready to stand up. But Vanessa wouldn't let the momentum slip away. One evening, we found a notice tacked to several doors, a mandatory HOA meeting with the ominous promise of enforcement discussions. It was her last-ditch effort to intimidate. Marcus warned me, "Expect theatrics. She'll try to rally her loyalists and break the unity we've built." At the meeting, Vanessa was all showmanship. She read from scripts, pointed fingers, and painted us as troublemakers bent on chaos. But this time, the crowd wasn't buying it. One after another, neighbors spoke up, sharing their experiences and calling for transparency and fairness. When Vanessa tried to cut off a speaker, Marcus calmly stood and said, "Let her finish. Everyone deserves a voice." The power play backfired spectacularly. Vanessa's frustrated glare was met with mounting support for change. Outside the meeting, a small group of loyalists confronted Marcus. The tension could have exploded, but Marcus's composed demeanor and a few carefully chosen words defused the situation before it escalated. This was more than muscle, it was strategy. Over the next few weeks, the audit results trickled in. Reports of financial mismanagement and improper enforcement practices shook the board. Some members distanced themselves from Vanessa, sensing the tide turning. Our community newsletter highlighted every finding, ensuring residents were informed and engaged. One afternoon, Jake came to me with an idea, a community block party to celebrate our progress and show Vanessa that unity was stronger than fear. We organized it fast, spreading word through the social media group. The event was electric. Music filled the air, kids ran freely, and neighbors who barely spoke before were laughing and sharing stories. Vanessa didn't attend, but her absence spoke volumes. At the party, I felt the weight of everything we'd been through. This was what we were fighting for, not just a house or a kayak, but a neighborhood where families could live without fear of arbitrary rules or bullies in power. Yet, beneath the celebration, I knew Vanessa's resistance wasn't over. Power like hers doesn't vanish quietly. But for now, we had the momentum, the law, and a community united. And that was a force no tyrant could ignore. The block party marked a turning point, but as anyone who's fought a long battle knows, victories breed resistance. Vanessa's absence didn't mean she was gone. It meant she was regrouping, strategizing for the next move, and I knew better than to underestimate her. Within days, whispers began spreading about a new HOA policy, one designed to tighten control and punish disruptive residents. It was vague, open to interpretation, and predictably targeted families like mine who had dared to stand up. I received a letter, this time accusing us of unauthorized gatherings and threatening fines for the block party itself. The irony wasn't lost on me, a celebration for community unity labeled a violation. But instead of intimidation, this fueled our resolve. Jake and I convened with Marcus and Claire to craft a response. We argued that the policy was an abuse of power, a tool to silence dissent, and began rallying neighbors to challenge it formally. The neighborhood divided more clearly now, those still loyal to Vanessa versus the growing coalition demanding fairness. The tension was palpable, simmering under polite greetings and casual small talk. At the next HOA meeting, the atmosphere crackled. Vanessa launched into a pointed speech about preserving community standards, her tone dripping with condescension. She singled out families who had organized the block party, including us. But this time, the room didn't quiet. Voices rose. Neighbors standing up, calling for transparency, questioning her authority. I watched as Vanessa's confident mask faltered under the weight of collective courage. One resident, Mrs. Patel, spoke passionately about feeling bullied by vague rules that punished kindness and creativity. Another, Mr. Alvarez, challenged the board's refusal to address actual neighborhood issues like broken streetlights and potholes. Marcus stood nearby, ever watchful, while Jake, seated beside me, whispered, "This is what unity looks like." Vanessa, visibly rattled, tried to regain control by moving to close the meeting, but Claire stood up, calmly reminding the board of procedural requirements and demanding proper discussion of the new policy. The meeting ended with no clear resolution, but the shift was undeniable. The board was on the defensive, and Vanessa's grip loosened further. Outside, conversations buzzed with renewed hope. Some neighbors who had stayed silent before now approached me, sharing stories of quiet harassment or expressing support. The community was awakening. Jake suggested organizing a legal aid clinic, inviting experts to educate residents on their rights and how to respond to HOA abuses. The idea took off. With volunteers stepping up to help, we started distributing pamphlets, holding workshops, and creating an online resource hub. The movement was growing organically, fueled by shared experiences and a simple desire to live without fear. Vanessa, sensing the threat, tried to intimidate the organizers with letters warning of fines for unauthorized meetings and disruptive behavior, but the neighborhood stood firm. One evening, as I sat with Marcus and Jake reviewing our plans, Vanessa's name came up again. "She won't quit," Marcus said, "but neither will you." I nodded. This is about more than us now. It's about every family this board has tried to silence. That truth anchored me. The battle wasn't just legal, it was about reclaiming a sense of community, dignity, and respect. And no matter how many obstacles Vanessa threw our way, we were ready. Have you ever felt powerless against rules that don't make sense? Tell me your story in the comments, because what we're doing here isn't just about one family. It's about every community fighting for fairness. Stay with me. Next up, things get even more intense, and you'll see how we turn the tide for good. The months of legal wrangling, neighborhood meetings, and quiet resistance had taken their toll, but they also hardened our resolve. Claire's words echoed in my mind. They're vulnerable now, Ethan. The HOA's house of cards is wobbling. We just have to push a little harder. Our next challenge was preparation for a formal hearing where the HOA's overreach would be scrutinized in front of the local council. It wasn't just about defending my family anymore. It was about proving the HOA had abused its power and violated community trust. Marcus took the lead on security and logistics, helping me and Jake prepare for the hearing. He trained us on staying composed under pressure, on reading the room, and, most importantly, on handling intimidation tactics. They'll try to rattle you, he warned. Don't give them the satisfaction. Jake soaked it all in, eager to play his part. His youthful energy was a counterbalance to my weariness. Together, we rehearsed answers, anticipated objections, and strategized ways to keep the focus on fairness rather than fear. Meanwhile, Claire dove deep into the HOA's records, uncovering more procedural missteps, missing documentation, undocumented fines, even financial irregularities suggesting misuse of funds. Each discovery was like a nail in Vanessa's coffin. But Vanessa wasn't idle. Her latest move was a public relations campaign aimed at painting us as troublemakers disrupting the peace. Flyers appeared on doorsteps accusing us of divisiveness and ignoring community values. At the next community meeting, Vanessa's supporters rallied behind her, echoing the same accusations. But instead of backing down, neighbors who had been silent found their voices. Mrs. Patel, Mr. Alvarez, and others shared first-hand accounts of unfair treatment, turning the tide of the conversation. When Vanessa tried to interrupt, Marcus quietly stood and said, "Let's hear everyone out. This community deserves transparency." The room fell silent. Vanessa's frustration was palpable, but she couldn't regain control. The hearing day arrived like a storm we'd been waiting for. The council chambers buzzed with anticipation as neighbors packed the room, some supportive, others skeptical. Vanessa arrived with a small entourage, her confidence masked behind a veneer of professionalism. Claire presented our case with precision, laying out the HOA's failures and abuses clearly and calmly. I shared my family's story, not just the fines and notices, but the emotional toll, the sleepless nights, the fear of losing our home. Jake followed, detailing how the neighborhood had rallied together, turning private struggles into a collective fight for justice. Vanessa's defense was predictable. Vague references to community standards and property values, thinly veiled attempts to dismiss our evidence as exaggeration, but the cracks in her story were obvious. After hours of testimony, the council deliberated. The wait was agonizing, but when the decision came, it was a victory. The HOA was found to have acted beyond its authority, and their punitive policies were to be revised with community input. The relief was overwhelming. Neighbors hugged, some cried. Vanessa's expression was unreadable, but her defeat was undeniable. Back home that evening, Jake and I sat on the porch reflecting. "We did it, Dad," he said quietly. "But this isn't the end, is it?" "No," I replied, staring at the stars. "But it's the beginning of something better, for us, and for this neighborhood." Our fight had been hard, full of setbacks and surprises, but through strategy, unity, and sheer determination, we'd shown that even the smallest family can stand up to the most entrenched power. And in that victory was a promise that no one would ever silence us again. The victory at the council felt like a milestone, but the war with Vanessa Reed wasn't over. The HOA, bruised but not broken, was determined to claw back control. Their next move was as audacious as it was chilling, a formal eviction notice targeting my family, now dressed in legalese, threatening to uproot us from the home we'd fought so hard to protect. I remember the day clearly. The letter arrived just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the porch where Jake and I often sat. I unfolded the crisp paper, feeling the weight of every word. "Failure to comply with community standards," it read. No specifics, just a cold ultimatum. Jake's eyes met mine, steady but burning with defiance. "They think this will scare us?" he asked. "No," I said quietly. It only makes us stronger. With Marcus by our side, we prepared for the storm ahead. His calm presence was a balm, grounding us as the tension thickened. We reviewed the eviction notice meticulously, dissecting every clause, every threat, searching for cracks. Meanwhile, Vanessa wasn't subtle. She ramped up her public campaigns, spreading rumors that painted our family as troublemakers. Flyers appeared on neighbors' doorsteps, accusing us of disrupting community peace and defying neighborhood harmony. It was a classic smear tactic, but the neighborhood had changed. People weren't buying it. At the next HOA meeting, the air was electric. Vanessa stood at the podium, her voice dripping with authority as she outlined her justifications for eviction. But the room was no longer her echo chamber. Neighbors rose one by one, recounting their own experiences of harassment and unfair treatment. Voices that had once been silenced now rang clear and strong. Mrs. Patel spoke passionately about losing sleep over vague threats. Mr. Alvarez challenged the board's priorities, pointing out neglected neighborhood repairs. When Vanessa attempted to cut off speakers, Marcus stood firm, reminding everyone of their right to be heard. His presence was a shield, and for the first time, Vanessa's control faltered. Outside the meeting, a small group of Vanessa's loyalists confronted Marcus, hoping to intimidate. But Marcus's composed demeanor and measured words diffused the situation before it could escalate. Meanwhile, Jake spearheaded a new community initiative, a legal aid workshop aimed at educating residents about their rights and how to navigate HOA conflicts. The turnout exceeded expectations, revealing a neighborhood hungry for knowledge and empowerment. Letters poured in from residents, grateful for the support, sharing stories of their own battles and renewed hope. Back at home, Claire was drafting a comprehensive legal response to the eviction notice, armed with evidence of the HOA's procedural failures and misconduct. The strategy was clear. Fight the eviction tooth and nail, expose Vanessa's abuses, and protect not just our family but every neighbor vulnerable to similar tactics. One evening, as Jake and I sat on the porch watching the stars, he said quietly, "This fight is bigger than us now. It's about standing up for everyone who's been pushed down." I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility but also the strength of our community. Vanessa had tried to break us with fear and lies. Instead, she'd galvanized a neighborhood into action. And no eviction notice, no matter how intimidating, could silence that. The day Marcus stepped into the spotlight was the day everything changed. Up until then, his role had been more of a shadow, quietly keeping us safe, strategizing behind the scenes. But at the next HOA meeting, his presence became impossible to ignore. Vanessa had arrived with her usual entourage, eyes sharp, confidence almost theatrical. She was ready to bulldoze any opposition, starting with me. But as she began her usual diatribe, Marcus stood beside me, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to her bluster. "Enough," Marcus said, his voice low but firm. The room fell silent. Vanessa blinked, caught off guard by his quiet authority. When she tried to interrupt a neighbor who was speaking out, Marcus gently but firmly told her to let the person finish. There was no aggression in his tone, just a quiet insistence that commanded respect. That moment shifted the power dynamic entirely. Vanessa's usual smirk was replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. The board members around her exchanged uneasy glances. For once, Vanessa wasn't the dominant force in the room. I seized the moment. Standing tall, I addressed the crowd. "We're not here to make noise or cause trouble. We're here because families deserve fairness. We deserve to live without fear of arbitrary rules and threats of eviction." Jake, sitting beside me, added with youthful conviction, "We've shown you the facts, the mistakes, and the injustices. It's time for change." The crowd murmured in agreement, a swell of support that Vanessa could no longer ignore. But the climax of the evening came when I revealed what Claire and I had uncovered. The financial mismanagement, the missing records, the procedural violations. The evidence was laid bare, indisputable and damning. Vanessa's face paled as murmurs grew louder. Her grip on the HOA board was slipping fast. In the days that followed, the community buzzed with renewed energy. The tide had turned. Marcus's role evolved from protector to symbol, a reminder that standing up to bullies requires both courage and strength. Jake's leadership in rallying neighbors and spreading information kept the movement alive. But Vanessa wasn't finished. She tried to rally her loyalists for a final push, sending threatening letters and attempting to stir division, yet the community's unity proved unbreakable. Then came the unexpected. The HOA board, pressured by mounting evidence and public scrutiny, voted to remove Vanessa from her position. It was a stunning victory, met with cheers and relief. Vanessa left with a cold glance but no words. The neighborhood had reclaimed its voice. That night, as Jake, Marcus, and I sat on the porch, the weight of the fight settled around us like a quiet victory. We'd faced intimidation, lies, and threats, and we'd come out stronger. Our family's home was safe, but more importantly, the community was free from fear. And that freedom was worth every battle. Ever had someone try to bully their way over you and got shut down instead? Share your story below, because this isn't just my fight. It's everyone's fight against those who think power means crushing others. Stick around, because the next part reveals how we sealed the deal with style. Vanessa's removal from the board was a watershed moment, but the real victory was far from simple closure. It was about reclaiming our community's heart and rewriting the rules she had twisted to her whim. What came next wasn't just about celebration. It was about sealing our triumph and ensuring no one would dare walk that path again. In the days following Vanessa's exit, I worked closely with the newly appointed board members, neighbors who actually cared about fairness and transparency. We drafted a new set of community guidelines, ones written with input from every family. No more vague clauses, no more secretive meetings. For the first time, the HOA felt like it belonged to the people, not the other way around. Jake took the lead on organizing a neighborhood gathering to symbolize this new era. A block party, bigger and better than the last, one that Vanessa wouldn't be able to ignore, even if she wanted to. The day of the party, I watched families mingle, laughter spilling into the warm afternoon air. Children played freely, neighbors shared food and stories, and the weight that had hung over us all seemed to lift. We had taken back our streets and our peace. But I had one last surprise in store for Vanessa and the remnants of her loyalists. With Marcus's help, we transformed the old kayak, the symbol of our fight, into a vibrant community art piece, anchored in the park where everyone could see it. Painted in bold colors, it bore the inscription, Legacy, Unity, Strength. That kayak, once the target of harassment, had become a beacon of resilience. When word spread, Vanessa's allies grumbled, but couldn't deny the powerful statement. The kayak stood as a reminder that families like ours would not be pushed aside or silenced. During the unveiling, I addressed the crowd. This kayak represents more than a family memory. It's a testament to what we can accomplish when we stand together. No bully, no unfair rule, no power trip can take away our dignity. Jake's voice echoed beside me. And remember, this is just the beginning. Vanessa never returned to the neighborhood meetings. The board, now guided by fairness and community spirit, worked tirelessly to repair the fractures she left behind. For us, the fight had forged bonds that ran deeper than neighborhood lines. It reminded us that standing up, no matter the odds, is how change happens. As I looked around at the smiling faces that day, I felt a profound sense of peace. The kayak, the home, the neighborhood, it was all safe now. And for once, the power belonged where it should, with the people. The days after the kayak unveiling were quieter, but not without their significance. It wasn't just about celebrating victory, it was about healing and building something stronger from the ashes Vanessa had left behind. The neighborhood was shifting, but the scars of the past lingered. I spent more time talking to neighbors, listening to stories that hadn't found a voice during the fight. Some shared quiet gratitude, others aired frustrations over years of feeling powerless. Mrs. Henderson confided how she finally felt safe to plant her garden without fear of arbitrary fines. Mr. Alvarez joked about how he'd never thought a kayak could unite an entire street. Jake, ever the organizer, pushed to keep the momentum going. He helped set up regular neighborhood meetings, not just about HOA rules, but about building community events, improving safety, and fostering friendships. Slowly, walls built by fear and suspicion crumbled. One afternoon, Marcus and I met in the old community center, now a hub for our revitalized neighborhood. We reflected on how far we'd come. From eviction notices to block parties, from whispered fears to loud voices. "You've got a strong community here," Marcus said, his eyes scanning the room filled with familiar faces. "They won't forget what you did." I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility but also pride. It wasn't just me, it was all of us. Vanessa's absence was still felt, but her shadow was fading. The new board members were working transparently, and the rules had been rewritten with input from every household. It was a new era, one built on respect and fairness. That night, as I sat on my porch, the kayak's colors glowing softly under the streetlights, I thought about my dad, how proud he would be to see what we'd accomplished, not just saving a family home, but restoring a neighborhood's soul. Jake joined me, his eyes bright. "Do you think Vanessa will try to come back?" I smiled. "Maybe, but this time we're ready. We know how to stand together." The fight had taught us more than just legal tactics or community organizing. It had shown us the power of unity, resilience, and the importance of standing up when it matters most. And as the night settled over Lake Serenity, I felt a deep peace. The kayak wasn't just a symbol of the past, it was a beacon for the future. No matter what came next, we were ready. The neighborhood had changed, but peace rarely arrives with fanfare. It settles quietly in moments others might overlook. One evening I strolled past the community park where the kayak art stood tall and proud. Families gathered there, children laughing and chasing each other under the fading twilight. What started as a fierce battle had blossomed into something much bigger, a true community. Jake caught up to me, his face soft in the street lamp's glow. "It's wild to think it all began with an old kayak," he said with a grin. I smiled, thinking about everything we had endured. Sometimes the smallest things remind us what's worth fighting for. The months of struggle, from eviction threats and endless meetings to legal battles and block parties, had reshaped more than just our neighborhood's rules. They had reshaped us all. We were no longer strangers living side by side. We were a family, bound by resilience and hope. New leadership took charge of the HOA, composed of neighbors who genuinely cared. They invited everyone's voice to the table and worked tirelessly to rewrite policies grounded in fairness and transparency. It felt like a fresh start. The kayak, once the target of relentless harassment, had become a beacon of that fresh start. Visitors stopped by to take pictures or ask about its story. I told it over and over, not just as my family's fight, but as a lesson in standing firm against injustice. One afternoon, Mrs. Henderson stopped by my porch, holding a homemade pie. "Ethan," she said softly, "thank you. You reminded us all that our voices matter." Her gratitude hit me deeper than any court victory ever could. This journey changed me. I wasn't just a homeowner defending property. I became a symbol of community strength, of courage and patience. Standing up to Vanessa and her loyalists wasn't easy. It demanded more than anger. It demanded strategy, endurance, and an unwavering belief in justice. Marcus's quiet strength steadied us through the darkest days. Jake's fiery spirit kept us moving forward. Claire's sharp legal mind illuminated the path. Together, we shifted the balance of power in a way no one expected. If there's one lesson this fight taught me, it's that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through the steady march of patience, unity, and resolve, and those quiet victories, slow and steady, are often the ones that endure. As I looked across the park filled with families enjoying a peaceful evening, I felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction, not just because we won, but because we won the right way. No shortcuts, no bitterness, just dignity. We reclaimed our neighborhood, our home, and our peace. If you're watching this while battling your own HOA nightmare, remember, real power lies in understanding the rules, having the patience to play the long game, and standing your ground with unwavering courage. Your voice matters more than you think. Don't give up. The fight you're in right now could change everything.